Welcome to the channel, Saviors, GH here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Sucrose by introducing her first, then explaining her abilities, what she can do, then recommended weapons, artifact sets, and what main stat and substat you're going to be looking for, and some of my own opinions at the end of the video. And with that said, let's do this! Sucrose is an anemo mage that can use Catalyst, the books, and the orbs, and she's a mobbing crowd control support character. Her first talent or skill is her normal attack, called Wind Spirit Creation. It gives her the ability to do a 4 consecutive anemo type attack that can trigger Swirl. And quick explanation about Swirl because it's an important part of Sucrose. So Swirl. It's an elemental reaction that deals extra AoE elemental damage based on the element combined with your anemo attacks or wind attacks. Here is an example. As you see, the target is marked with Pyro. And using your basic attack, which is anemo type, triggers an elemental reaction called Swirl. And as you see, it dealt extra Pyro AoE damage to the target. Swirl is pretty good for mobbing, and with the proper artifact set, you can use Swirl to debuff targets, so that they will receive more elemental damage. We're gonna talk about that in a bit in the artifacts part of the video. Her next talent is her elemental skill called Astable Anemo Hypostasis Creation 6308. Yup, that's a long name. What it does is attack a spot centered at your current target, and it launches enemies up and deals anemo type damage. As you see here, it's a pretty decent size area attack, pretty good to use for mobbing. Now, there's a constellation associated with this called Clustered Vacuum Field and Alchemania. Vacuum Field first. It's very straightforward. If you have Clustered Vacuum Fields, Constellation level 1, it will give you the ability to use 6308 skill 2 times. Now, Alchemania at Constellation level 4 basically reduces the cooldown of 6308 as you attack. Her elemental burst is called Forbidden Creation, which summons a wind spirit that pulls enemies towards it and deals continuous anemo type damage. This elemental burst solidifies Sucrose's role as a mobbing type character. Now, it has an extra effect called Elemental Absorption, and what it does is take the elemental mark of the enemy, then change the color of the wind spirit according to the absorbed element, and what happens there is the anemo damage of the wind spirit will have an additional damage based on the type of the absorbed element. Here's a slow-mo if you want to take a closer look. And as you see, after using the elemental burst, at the first hit, it immediately absorbs the electro mark and then deals anemo plus extra electro damage. This is pretty good because it triggers Swirl until the elemental burst subside. And of course, there's a constellation related to it, and it's called Beth Unbound Form and Chaotic Entropy. Beth Unbound Form is Constellation level 2, and what it does is make the wind spirit last longer for 2 seconds. And Chaotic Entropy is Constellation level 6, and what it does is when elemental absorption happens, when the spirit changes color, like for example Pyro, the whole party will receive bonus elemental damage to Pyro. So yeah, the elemental damage bonus is based off the element absorbed. Her next talents is what makes her a worthwhile support character, and the talents are called Catalyst Conversion and Mollis Favonius. Catalyst Conversion first, and what it does is when Sucrose triggers a Swirl, all your characters in the party of the same element that triggered Swirl will have a plus 50 to Elemental Mastery. For example, if the enemy is marked with Pyro and you use Sucrose to trigger Swirl, what happens is all Pyro Elemental characters will have an extra 50 Elemental Mastery. Here's an actual testing. My Xiangling's Elemental Mastery is 214, and when I trigger Swirl on a Pyro marked enemy, as you see, my Xiangling now have a 264 Elemental Mastery. It's a pretty good support talent to have to get more out of the elemental reactions. Now, the last talent we're gonna look at is Mollis Favonius. And what it does is when your elemental burst and skill hit an enemy, the whole party excluding Sucrose will have an extra 20% elemental mastery based off Sucrose's elemental mastery. It's another elemental mastery buff by just using your elemental burst and skill. Let's do a testing. Sucrose at the moment has 463 Elemental Mastery and Xiangling has 214 Elemental Mastery. And as you see, after using my Elemental skill, my Xiangling's Elemental Mastery is now 307 in total because it received an extra 93 Elemental Mastery. That's pretty awesome. The more Elemental Mastery Sucroses have, the more Elemental Mastery your teammate gets. Now, recommended weapons for Sucrose. The only weapon for Sucrose that I recommend is Mapa Mare and Sacrificial Fragments. Mainly because both have a substat of Elemental Mastery. Now, if you have any of the 5 stars, for sure it will work. Like the Lost Prayers in Skyward Atlas, any of those is decent. Now here's my tier list for the recommended weapons for Sucrose, and rank 1 is the best. At rank 1, it's the Mapa Mare, because the substat is Elemental Mastery as I've said, and the effect further increases elemental damage. And another factor that made me put Mapa Mare at rank 1 is because it's available to everyone, and you can max refine it the free-to-play way. Now, at rank 2 is the Sacrificial Fragments. It's another very good catalyst for Sucrose, especially at 0 constellation, wherein you can only use elemental skill once every 15 seconds. With the help of Sacrificial Fragments, you can have a chance to recast 6308 again. If you have a constellation 0 Sucrose, Mapa Mare and Sacrificial Fragments is actually tied in my weapon recommendation. Now at rank 3, it's the Lost Prayer. At rank 4 is the Skyward Atlas. To be honest, Lost Prayer in Skyward Atlas is very close. If you have a more specific question on the weapons, just ask in the comment section down below and I will answer as soon as I see it. And now let's proceed with the recommended artifact sets. My only recommendation is the Viridescent Venerer. 4 pieces of the Viridescent. Because 4-piece set gives you the ability to debuff enemies, reducing their elemental resist to the element combined with Swirl. So if you trigger a Pyro Elemental Swirl, the enemy Pyro resistance will be reduced by 40%. The Viridescent Venerer is a must for Sucrose. But if you're still early in the game, you can use 4 pieces of Instructor set. Now let's head on to the artifact main stat and substat. Of course, we're not gonna talk about the main stat of the Flower of Life artifact because it's always HP, and so is the Plume of Death because it's always attack. Just make sure your Flower of Life and Plume of Death has a good set of substat. That said, let's start with the substat. You're gonna be looking for Elemental Mastery first and foremost, then Energy Recharge, then the rest could be Attack Percent, Attack Stat, Crit Rate, Crit Damage, any combination of those. The priority substat will be Elemental Mastery. For the main stats of your artifact, always go for Elemental Mastery. On your Sands of Aeon, it should be Elemental Mastery. The goblets should also have Elemental Mastery or Anemo damage bonus. And your circlets should be Elemental Mastery. If you fulfill all those stat requirements, your Sucrose will be a destroyer of worlds. Next to Venti. Now, opinion time. Sucrose to me is a great mobbing, crowd control, and support character. Even if you have Venti, domains with a bunch of mobs will be short work. Her ability to buff teammates is very unique and welcome addition to any party composition. And having the ability to debuff enemies if you have the Viridescent set will get you much more closer to the dream mega damage you wanna have. And that's Sucrose. I hope this video helped, and if you like the video, hit the thumbs up, share, and then subscribe to be part of the Gaming Hardcore family. And as always, this is Gaming Hardcore. See you in the next one.